Hello, and welcome back to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic, and maybe the TV show isn't the only thing that's chaotic, but maybe it is. So today we'll be talking about episode 28 of Flux Too Far. So grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in. Episode summary: Kaz and Peyton break into Medinu's vault with the goal of scanning a Flux bauble to add to Kaz's collection. Seattle told Peyton the vault was supposed to be empty, but there were guards. Sarah was supposed to have a match, but her opponent no-showed, so Tom offers to battle. Sarah originally turns down Tom's offer because she doesn't like to play with friends, but Tom baits her with some trash talk, and she agrees to play as long as they keep it friendly. Meanwhile, Kaibon and Jigarex break into Mudino's vault, while Kaz and Peyton are still searching for the Flux bauble. The Flux bauble falls onto the ground, and Kaibon flexes Peyton, Kaz, Mudino, Seattle, and Jigarex to Glacier Plains with himself. Then, just Kaz and Peyton flex to the storm tunnel, and Kaz drops his scanner in the wind. Eventually, Kaz gets his scanner back, and the flux bubble breaks, transporting them to a new location with a beach. Sarah beats Tom in their match, and that's what we're working with, really. Um, we get some flux bobbling around Param, and we get a friendly match between Tom and Sarah. So, analysis. This episode is such a return to form for a chaotic episode. We get a classic A-B plot and a moment that pushes our overarching story forward, and one's in Param, one's in chaotic, and we get a match. Such a return to form. These I feel like all these past couple episodes have been like breaking the form. You know, they're in Iparu Jungle the whole time. The whole thing's a chaotic match between Peyton and Lulu. You know, just they're playing around. But this return to form, classic formula. So our two plots are Peyton and Kaz, Scan Quest, and Tom Sarah Battle, which we finally get to see Sarah Battle, which we've been waiting for what, 28 episodes? It's only taken 28 episodes? That's like longer than a normal season of TV. But here we are, and we're so proud of her. And she wins the episode. She wins the match. Which, if we're calculating her win rate, we've seen her play one battle, and she wins one battle. She's an 100% winner, baby. Or if you include her play of the day, that's 2 wins. But if you don't include that, if you include implied battles, like we get her losing to a Codemaster implication, and we get the Armageddon episode where she loses to Hotan, maybe a 1/3 win rate, maybe a 1/2 win rate, you know? But the one whole match we see, she wins. So I just like to say it here for everyone to know Sarah's a good chaotic player. But really, the emotional arc of this episode is within Tom, and he learns that it is okay for things to be cool and chill and fun and normal. Like, that's what he learns. He learns that it's okay for things to be fun and chill and cool and normal. And for one more time, he learns to be fun and chill and cool and normal. And that is okay for things to be fun and chill and cool and normal, which I love that Sarah's motivation for winning the match, for not holding back in her battle, is because she wants to win, not because she doesn't want to lose, but she wants to win because if she lost, she'd never hear the end of it. She wants to win because she doesn't want to give leverage to Tom in the future, in debates, in play fights, in if they're ranking who's the best chaotic player. Now Sarah has a win over Tom, right? So maybe she's better than Tom. Maybe she's not. It seemed like they were pretty evenly matched on the playing field, which we know now Tom is a good player, maybe even great. So if Sarah can beat a good, maybe even great player, that also establishes her as a pretty good player. And the evidence for him to degrade her in the future, non-existent, because he can't say he's the better chaotic player because Sarah beat her. And like, no, thank you. They're both good. They both have integrity and stand alone as good chaotic players. So that's that on that. But Sarah kind of starts and ends this episode in the same place. She just wants to play a match, fun, cool, and chill. And Tom is challenging that. Like, Sarah was going to have a less fun, chill, cool match because she was, because she had an opponent, scheduled match in a dome. She wanted to win. She spent all that time on her strategy, but she doesn't like being competitive with friends. And so Tom is being like overtly competitive, and honestly, he's being a bad sport. Tom Hader, he's being a bad sport. And so when Sarah wins, Tom has to reevaluate those feelings when Sarah is being a good sport to him, right? She's having good sportsmanship. She won. She said, haha, that was fun. That was chill. Like, I'm glad we had a fun and chill time. Right, Tom? And so he has to reevaluate his competitive feelings and he has to reconcile with the fact that he lost in order to match her energy. Which, I'm glad that he learned something, that things are allowed to be fun and cool and normal. But that was not his instinct. His instinct was to be honestly the antagonist of this episode. He is the villain of Chaotic, and I want you to think about that. Tom is the villain. Tom's the villain. Tom is the villain of Chaotic. And as a Tom hater, maybe I was right all along. Because in this episode, Tom is our antagonist because he's the one being competitive and he's jeopardizing the fun, chill, cool nature of the competition. And that's okay. We still love Tom, but it is part of his nature to be competitive. And that's where the conflict of this episode comes into play because Tom is being competitive. And if our emotional arc is with Tom, he's being the villain and learns to be better. Learns to become a hero again, whatever. Now, on the flip side, Peyton and Kaz, they're not really going through an emotional arc. They're going through an adventure. They're going through a journey. Things happen to them rather than them causing things to happen. Which, they go through this journey, they flex, they bobble all throughout Param, and it leads to them getting a new location scan, which honestly is a pretty big win, considering that is the equivalent prize you get if you defeat a Codemaster. Like, does Peyton even need to play his Codemaster Imthor match that he got last episode when he lost to Lulu but then, like, beat Sarah? He has 7 wins. But does he even need to beat Imthor? Because he can get a new fresh location scan right here, right now, with this Flux bauble. So, right, are there themes, are there lessons to this episode? Not super hardcore. This is like a fun, chill, light, cool, normal episode. But if you had to extract a lesson, if you had to extract a theme, I would think it would be the sportsmanship from Tom's storyline of like, you can be, let me say it again, fun, chill, cool, and normal. And just have a good time. And like, you can play a game and be competitive, and you can play a game and you don't have to be competitive. You just have to establish what you're looking for ahead of time. So, onto the lore section. This episode is canonically sound with a lot of past episodes. So, Peyton has a hookup on how to get into Medino's vault. Let me rephrase that. Peyton has an inside man on how to get into Medino's vault. And, then we see Seattle and we're like, why is it not Seattle? And then it is Seattle. And that makes sense because Seattle and Peyton are friends, they're buddies, and that goes back to the Scavenger Scan episode when we saw they were friends. And we also learn that Mudinu has a vault, good for him, but we learn that Seattle calls Mudinu Your Highness, which we get that reference to royalty for Mudinu. Now, I'm still unsure why nobody has called him Prince Mudinu yet, because he's the prince and he's Mudinu. Hey, Prince Mudinu. Hey, Prince Mudinu. You know, like that's his name, that's his title. Let's use his name and title. But whatever. And so this reference to royalty from Udinu, calling him Your Highness, I think is good enough. The other thing we get to see is how a flux bauble works in real life Param. Whoa, because in the Drome, right, it fluxes you to the top location card in your deck or whatever. Something like that. And so how does it work in Param if, you know, creatures in Param don't have location decks to flip a new active location? Well, in Chaotic, it just transports you to a random location. You know, which, okay, cool. Now, I think that's interesting because it works differently in Param than it does in the Drome, but it has to, right? There's no location decks, there's no whatever. And so this is obviously a creation that like was made for the chaotic game and not necessarily chaotic Param, but has to be adapted to Param because it has to exist there. So that's interesting. But what's really interesting to me is the transportation effect. When you flux in the Drome, you get the code transporting you to a new location. And we get that same transition in the real life Param, right? They use the code effect, which I think has some major implications. It really supports my own headcanons of what's going on at Chaotic and what Param is like made of. Because if we saw the code motif in the drums, you're like, yeah, that's code. But seeing the code motif in Param, does that mean Param is made of code too? I'll let you simmer with that question and let me know what you think. Because to me, that's what that implication means. If there is code in Param, is Param made of code? Let me know what you think. Now on to fun facts and other notes. Not too much here, but I do want to ask the question. How do Kaibon, Jigarex, Mudinu, and Seattle get home? They're out there in Glacier Plains. That is far from the desert. That is far from the underworld. How are they going to get home? And so they're really just going to walk, or are they going to find some vehicle of transportation? Are they going to work together? Like, now we're all in overworld territory. The enemy of the enemy is my friend. Let's work on getting out of here. You know what I mean? Are they going to travel terrain by foot? That sounds like a nightmare for them. A true terror of Param. And so, for them, truly a flux too far. They can't get out of that situation. They have to figure it out. And they don't have the flux bubble anymore. Peyton and Kaz took that and destroyed it in the storm tunnel. So, that kind of sucks for them, doesn't it? Really, my final thoughts on this episode are I like this episode. It's fun, it's light, it's not serious. This episode is just a good time, and you get rewarded with a new beach location. And I do think Tom was being a little bit annoying this episode, but that's my right. And, you know, Tom's the villain, so how could I not be annoyed with him? And what are you going to do? That's his true nature, you know? And honestly, I think that's something that is really enticing to me about Chaotic is that these people are such rounded characters. They have sides to them, you know? Tom has his good and honest and virtuous side, but now here he's getting competitive. He's being antagonistic. He's, hot-headed and quick to blow up. These are all aspects of his character. And I think about, or I have been thinking about the past few days, like, why do these characters feel like real people? And there's like that writing technique of like when you write a character, don't just write, you know, their likes and dislikes. Because, a character who likes pineapple or like likes fashion kind of means nothing because those aren't action oriented. Those aren't things that the character does, right? Versus how do they deal with conflict? Well, Tom deals with conflict by being confrontational, by getting hot headed. How do they resolve conflict? How do they, you know, approach, how do they overcome uncertainty? How do they deal with their emotions? These are all things that I think you can answer about Tom, Sarah, Kaz, and Peyton. And I think that's why they feel so rounded and so real. And you get that dimensionality, right? Sometimes he's in a good mood, sometimes he's fun and playful, upstanding citizen, sometimes he has integrity. Versus here, he still has integrity, but he's being competitive and he's like egging Sarah on because he's like itching for conflict. It's really interesting to see. And isn't that what media and connecting with the media is all about? You know, seeing characters, having themes, learning lessons, seeing stories. I don't know anymore. But I like this episode. It kind of feels like a filler episode, but it's not because we get the new beach-like location that we'll come back to at a later date. And with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!